Hi everybody, I'm the 100 Proof News Hound here with another episode of the 100 Years and More Show. Today we're going to tell you the tale of the most dangerous criminal in America that nobody knows anything about. He was a bank robber more daring than John Dillinger and as ruthless as Bonnie and Clyde. And like Dillinger, he escaped from prison with impunity. He dominated the Chicago headlines for 15 years during Prohibition like nobody except Al Capone himself. Yet I guarantee you had never heard of him, Henry Fernekes. Well, that's going to change right now. Remember to like and subscribe. Subscriptions are extremely important to develop the channel. Now sit back and here we go. The life and times of Henry Fernekes. Big headline says, exposed plot on Loop Bank. Okay, so we're dealing with a bank robbery and somehow has a plot. But what does it say here? Detectives are amazed. Detectives, hardened to shock by years of experience in the underworld, were amazed at the manner in which the wily little robber chief, though harried by the police wherever he turned, still kept his gang under his thumb and pushed further and further toward completion of his plans for the gigantic bank robbery. So we got a little guy and a professional gang pushing towards some gigantic robbery. Every move he made was scientific, they said. He studied many hours by day and night in the up-to-the-minute textbooks to learn the actions of modern gases, explosive, bullets, and other things necessary to perfect the robbery. Gases? He built around him with the care and choosing of a president of a railroad system, the most capable and daring men in his line. What the heck was he planning on doing? Well, Chief of Detective William Shoemaker summarizes the plan as follows. They were to come to this bank in two high-powered automobiles. There were to be about 10 men in the plot. Each had his duties and it had been drilled in them time and time again by the, well, here's the first time they'll use the word. He's a height-challenged individual, and they use the M word. I'm not going to use the M word. What I'm going to use, at the end you'll see, that he is even though he's an intelligent guy, his whole life is idiotic. So we're going to do the contraction of idiot, which comes out as idjit. So from here on in, we're going to refer to him as the idjit. There wasn't a chance for a slip, they thought. In the cars, they were to bring pump guns, rifles, sawed-off shotguns, and revolvers, enough to equip a company of infantry. They were also to bring the most modern offensive weapons known to man. Good thing this is 1925 instead of 1945, they're bringing nuclear weapons. It included 3 big tanks of ammonia, gas masks for themselves, and 10 smoke bombs. Police said they'd confiscated all this material. They were to enter the bank, close all the doors. The men carrying the ammonia tanks were to unload the caps and set the poison fumes into the air. Customers, clerks, and officials would drop instantly, possibly die if they didn't get help soon enough. This is like the trenches. The bandits, safe behind their gas masks, would then loot the cages and vaults of every last cent of coin, paper money, and bonds. Almost before the police could hear of it, they would be on their way. The police chief said if we followed them in time to make them uncomfortable, they would set off their smoke bombs in the Loop streets and send up black clouds, and the Loop would become night, and we would be lost. And if we penetrated the smoke and still pursued, they would open fire with the arsenal of guns and try to fight their way out. Good thing the police caught him. Who is this guy? And why, most importantly, don't we know about him? Here he is. Idjit bandit seized in library. Idjit slayer, bank robber is captured here. Caught in library after 4 years search. Well, that's got to have a backstory to it. They've been searching for this fellow for 4 years. But in going through here, 4 years isn't far enough back. We've got to go back 11 years to September 19th, 1914, where this gentleman, and we'll give him his name now, Mr. Fernekes, Henry Fernekes, appears in the Chicago papers. Headline, $9 a week boy robs to support 16-year-old bride. Gaily holds up Loop offices and gets $45. So this fellow attempted to rob some offices on the Loop in Chicago and was not successful. But you know what? The papers took a liking to the guy. They devoted a full page to him, absolute full page, photographs and everything. Before he went to rob the joint, here's the note that he left to his wife Lula. A few words before I go on this ungodly errand, although knightly in purpose. If I am caught, which will only be at my death, as that is much preferable, learn to forgive and forget, as my sincere love for you prompted this action. I wanted to give you comfort and happiness, but alas, the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. And it goes on to explain that he had married a 16-year-old, but only had a $9 a week job and couldn't support her. It's noted here on the marriage certificate that he's said to be the son of Peter Fernekes, a summer resort keeper at Valparaiso. When asked if his father was not the Peter Fernekes who formerly owned the notorious Village Inn, the young man would say nothing. Apparently, throughout the story, there's something sinister about this Village Inn, and apparently he grew up there and I guess tainted it. Here's what the paper had to say. The police went to the apartment. Among the boy's effects they found there was the letter. And when the boy robber talked, he said he was getting $9 a week. He said as a clerk in the office of the Independent Pneumatic Tool Company, he couldn't get married and that he must have more money. So he did whatever anyone else would do. He went out and he bought a magazine pistol, which is a semi-automatic gun with a clip, and a long black-barreled revolver, some cotton batting for gags, some leather thongs for binding wrists and arms, a jimmy, a book called Stop Thief, and other implements of the burglar trade. Then he bought a package of cigarettes, took out the Turkish rug it contained, which is basically a handkerchief, and he fashioned a mask out of it. After he got arrested, it's funny, people always want to help. Father-in-law is home for boy robber Fernekes. 18-year-old bandit will face court today on 5 separate charges. This is the father-in-law, the father of the 16-year-old bride. If I had known you were so hard-pressed for money, the letter read in part, I'd have offered you and your wife a home here with me long before this. You're welcome to come here and stay for the rest of your life. But he doesn't want to stay. He wants action. Fernekes wants action. The newspaper's still taking a liking to this guy, even with this headline. Young bridegroom bandit a sociopath. Henry J. Fernekes, the youthful bandit who says he turned to outlawry because of his inability to support a 16-year-old bride on $9 a week, was found to be mentally deficient yesterday, but was held to the grand jury. They're charging him anyways. The head shrink, Dr. W.J. Hickson, called him a high-grade sociopath. I don't know if that's an insult or not. Is it good to be a high-grade sociopath? Better than a low-grade sociopath? The boy is the son of Pete and Lizzie, who formerly conducted the Village Inn on the north side. His father now brands him a disgrace, expressed his intention of asking the trial judge to send Henry to prison for 2 years. Way to go, Dad. So he's convicted of the 5 crimes, and he's sent away to a reformatory, not to Joliet or one of the good prisons. He's sent away to a reformatory. He reappears. He didn't serve much time. We'll get into exactly how much. But the next headline is in 1922. Headline, Quiet Boy of Chicago nabbed for New York murders. Robbed bank, killed 2, police charge. Henry J. Fernekes, a Chicago boy who in 1914, when 16 years of age, attempted to hold up an office in the First National Bank building here in order to obtain funds to support his 16-year-old bride, was arrested yesterday in New York, charged with a bank robbery and 2 murders. Fernekes, now 24 years old, is alleged to have been the lone bandit who held up the First National Bank and then killed 2 cashiers when they tried to prevent his escape. And why, after that, the newspapers of the time still continue to treat him in sort of a Robin Hood way is beyond me, but they do. The story continues. In Chicago, he was known as a quiet boy who never was friendly with other fellows. He lived with his father, Peter, in the rear of the latter's saloon, known as the Village Inn, at State and Erie Streets. When he was tried, he was sentenced to serve an indefinite term in Pontiac Reformatory. A few months after his term began, he was paroled to Chicago, police records show. So he only did a few months for the robberies, then he's turned loose on society, and of course has already killed 2 people. But that's not the end. By 1924, October 5th, headline, Hold up bank, flee as girl gives alarm. In a spectacular raid that yielded them only $2,500. $2,500, again, is about $80,000 in today's money. That doesn't seem like a small take. But anyways, 3 young highwaymen early last evening held up the Parkway State Bank at Grant Place, Clark, and Sedgwick Streets. This is kind of like a movie. They worked fast while crowds, streetcars, and autos were passing the bank. They used a Winchester rifle and an automatic pistol and escaped south on Sedgwick in an automobile while a dozen squads of police and detectives were on their way to the scene. Now, this is a scene. Now, just think. We've got a fellow here. You're going to see that he's about 5 feet tall. He's about an inch taller than Danny DeVito. You could see Jimmy Cagney playing him in the 1930s, or maybe Tom Cruise in the early 2000s. Well, if Tom Cruise can play Jack Reacher, he can certainly play a couple inches shorter than themselves and play this bank robber. Here's what he did, though. Chief of the robbers enters. That's the little headline. The leader of the trio, carrying the rifle, made a sudden entry into the bank. Taking a running start, he slid 10 feet across the tile floor, then dropped the gunny sack that had been concealing his rifle and ordered 6 employees to put up their hands. April 19th, 1925. Idiot bandit, slayer, bank robber, caught. Trapped in library hunted for 4 years. A slender, quiet youth, scarcely more than 5 feet tall, browsing over a book in the John Cruer Library at Randolph and Michigan Boulevard, was surrounded by 5 detectives and arrested. He was identified last night as the leader of a gang which has held up nearly a score of Chicago banks and seized more than $1 million. You ever wonder what they do with all the money? These guys never have any money. They never appear to have any money. He gets stolen $1 million. That's like $35 million today. Paid no tax on it, yet somehow is like, ends up being, you'll find him, he's living above a hardware store and only got the clothes on his back. It's noted, in addition, Fernekes is wanted in Pennsylvania for the murder of 2 state policemen in 1921 and for the killing in the same year of 2 bank cashiers in Pearl River, New York. Still referring to him as a boy bandit, though. The tale of the boy bandit's life and of the 4-year search for him, of dozens of times he slipped through their fingers in an uncanny manner, of the astounding and daring manner in which he carried off his exploits, of his final capture, is rife with dramatic incidents that would put the most imaginative movie writers to shame. I'll give him that. This guy's had a bit of a charmed life here, considering such a heinous human being. All right. In summarizing who he is, it noted that he was freed from prison in 1918. He was released from Pontiac Reformatory. Soon afterward, police became aware that the youth had become one of the country's most daring criminals. When he shot and killed 4 men in the East in 1921, Chicago police determined to get him. Since then, a special squad has been constantly on Fernekes' trail. So they established their own squad of G-men, as it were, to chase him down. Weren't very successful. They did catch him, though, 4 years later. They followed scores of tips. Many times they arrived at designated places to find their quarry gone, but a few minutes before. It's kind of like The Fugitive, eh? They're on the trail of the good doctor, but in this one, they're on the trail of the idiot bank robber. It's funny, they're still attempting, this is an article of April 19th, 1925, they're still attempting to aggrandize his accomplishments here. And they're referencing back to the original robbery in the stores, on the loop, in the offices above the bank building. It's noted that first robbery seems to have charted the course of his life. His tactics in future robberies, which were to startle the country, were always the same as in that boyish escapade. He was a 2-gun man. He robbed in broad daylight and he never wore a mask. When he wasn't using the Winchester, he did in fact always carry those 2 guns. And as some of the commentators noted, the guns almost appeared to be bigger than he was. Another crime that comes to light here. Idiot bandit identified as bank slayer. Another of the notches on the gun of Henry J. Fernekes. 5 foot 4 inch. He keeps growing. He was 5 foot a little while ago. Master bandit was explained yesterday. Fernekes was identified as the man who murdered Michael Sviankowski, cashier, in a daring $12,000 robbery in March 19. The bandit yawned as the 2 men declared that he was the bandit who poked a gun into the cashier's stomach and pulled the trigger when Sviankowski showed signs of resistance. So he's now been charged with 5 murders, as well as a score of bank robberies. Once again, Fernekes is given the royal treatment by the Chicago Tribune. The Chicago papers continue to give Fernekes the royal treatment. In an article of May 6, 1925, in the Tribune, the headline reads, Fernekes, the idiot bandit, talks of his career of crime like a Babbitt. Babbitt was a popular novel released earlier that decade, which takes up a full 3 columns in a full page of text. It is really a sympathetic portrait of Fernekes. In modern eyes, it's totally inappropriate. They're portraying this killer bank robber in sort of a Robin Hood vein, but there is no aspect of this which is Robin Hoodian. There's only the hood. Now, the prosecutor did something smart. Before trying him on any of the murder charges, they had him tried on bank robbery charges, and he was convicted of a bank robbery of the Inland Trust, stealing $4,000, and bank robbery is treated more serious than other robbery crimes. He was sentenced to 10 years to life on that single charge. That allows them, now they know where Fernekes is going to be, the murder raps. But Fernekes is an interesting fellow in that he doesn't like to stay put. He's not content to be behind bars. He wants out. So here we are, January 22, 1926. Fernekes' plot to saw a way out of jail is foiled. It turns out there had been a previous attempt while in the courthouse of him trying to escape. It says here in the previous attempt to escape, he'd been locked into the bullpen adjoining the judge's courtroom. A guard discovered the 3 were about to lower themselves through a ventilator from which they had removed an iron grating. The guard forced the 3 back into the room at gunpoint and yelled for help. So they sort of have the impression that Fernekes doesn't like incarceration. So they search his cell, and tucked neatly between the mattress and the wall of Fernekes' cell, Captain Wheeling found a saw, a file, several safety razors, and a coil of wire. They were hidden in various nooks. And the next day, January 23rd, 1926, it's noted that the 3, which was Fernekes, Flannery, and McGuigan, which are the 3 that were charged with the murder, were denied a new trial and sentenced to hang on February 19th by Judge Glemmel. So he's got only a month to live. Or does he? He doesn't. Because on February 17th, 2 days before the execution, Fernekes and pals are granted a stay in death. That's the headline. They're granted a stay of execution while their convictions are reviewed by the state Supreme Court. And that's expected to delay matters 2 or 3 months. But again, Mr. Fernekes is not content. He's not content to just lay incarcerated and let the fates determine what happens to him. Headline, July 19th, 1926, Idiot bandit blasts wall to dodge gallows. Really? Smuggled dynamite fashioned into a bomb and believed to have been set by Henry Fernekes, the Idiot bandit, is an attempt to escape his impending doom on the gallows. Yesterday, it blew a 15-inch hole in the west wall of the old county jail. So he somehow managed to get dynamite into the jail and blow a hole, but he wasn't big enough. They go on in the article to describe the thickness of the wall and how that just didn't quite blow a large enough hole for them to escape. But he got close, and that didn't end his criminal activity while in jail. Article, May 2nd, 1927. Schwepp plot traced to sell of Fernekes. Reveals $1 million ransom conspiracy. So he's apparently got something to do with kidnapping. Schwepp, I assume, is the Schwepp like tonic water guys, but well, let's see what it says here. Had plans to kidnap John Shed Aquarium, Schwepp, 9-year-old son of Lake Forest millionaire, gone through. His captors planned to demand $1 million ransom and use the money in a desperate effort to obtain the release by fair means or foul of Henry J. Fernekes from the Joliet Penitentiary, it was revealed yesterday. And it was Fernekes, the Idiot bandit, who is now serving a sentence in Joliet for robbery and awaiting a second trial for murder, who planned the kidnapping plot. So he's got his criminal empire still being manipulated from his cell at Joliet Penitentiary. But you know what? Fernekes has got horseshoes in places because they reviewed his conviction, and they overturned it. New trial frees 2 sentenced to death. It's a complicated. Fernekes was earlier conviction overturned, and McGuigan and Flannery were overturned on that December 24th, 1927 date. And why? It says here, the Supreme Court held that certain evidence had been illegally placed in the record against them and ordered new trials. But I guess without that evidence, they had no chance of a conviction and all the charges were dropped. Thankfully, they still had him in the 10-year to life sentence because of the bank robbery, but on the murder convictions. But do you think that Mr. Fernekes was just going to wait and see what would happen to him in prison to see whether or not any other charges were going to be prosecuted or whether the state of New York would finally extradite him and get him back there on those charges? No, not Mr. Fernekes, because here's the headline. On August 4th, 1935, Fernekes out of Joliet cell. In one of the most audacious escapes in the history of the Joliet Penitentiary, Henry J. Idiot Fernekes, notorious bandit, gunman, and bank robber, walked calmly out of that institution yesterday, where he was serving a 10-year to life sentence for bank robbery. How could he possibly have just walked out? Fernekes, having obtained civilian clothes in some mysterious manner, was able to pose as a visitor inside the walls of the old prison. His ruse was so completely successful that a uniformed guard touched his cap politely as he unbarred the gates to the prison yard and allowed the idiot killer to stroll to freedom. He just walked out of the maximum security state prison. Well, that's in August. He's only out a few months because on October 29th, 1935, he's caught. Fernekes caught posing as workman. His landlord impressed by the killer's piety. I don't know if anyone else was ever impressed by Fernekes' piety, but here's what happened. Henry J. Idiot Fernekes, the wily little killer who precipitated a major scandal in the state administration by his escape on August 3rd, was recaptured yesterday. Police from the state's attorney office arrested him at Devon and Newgard Avenues at the edge of Rogers Park. He surrendered without a struggle. He'd apparently been hiding in Chicago since his escape. But this is interesting. You know, think back when you're looking at Bonnie and Clyde and Dillinger and Machine Gun Kelly and those guys. They always commit a crime in the one state, and they're trying to get to the state line because it really was difficult to extradite. Extradition is difficult enough between some countries, but it was like that between states because, as it's stated here in the article, for 14 years, the state of New York has been seeking to extradite him for trial on the charge of murdering 2 bank messengers in Pearl River, New York. Yet they couldn't properly extradite him. But in any event, he's back. They caught him. But remember back to the original note that he left Lula. Remember in the original note that he left Lula, he said that if he goes sideways, it would end in his death, and death was preferable to incarceration. That was his opinion way back in 1914. Well, in the headline of the month, and this is the headline of the month, Mr. Fernekes took the Hermann Goering way out and ingested cyanide. It turns out that he had a crystal cyanide cylinder sewn into the seam of his pants, and he took it in the first few days when he was back in prison and died instantly of cyanide poisoning. Headline, Idget's death ends amazing crime career. Outlawry, a real science to killer Fernekes. So even at the end, they're giving him that compliment that he was an organized man who took being a very bad man very seriously. Well, that's the tale of the Idget bank robber. He died like he lived, a wild card in the poker game of life. Now, without irony, it's time for a classic short cocktail. Not a shot. Shots are for barbarians. A short cocktail is an intense little cocktail served. You can serve it in the smallest wine glass you have like this. We're going to do a strange thing on this though, because we want to do it without ice. We're going to chill the ingredients. So chill the bottles, chill the glass, and here's how it's made. 2 parts rye whiskey, 1 part ruby port. Pour the chilled liquids into the chilled glass and stir. You garnish it with a twist of lemon. You need to get some bitterness in there to counteract the sweetness of the port. This is a drink which only exists in my mind, so we're going to call it the bank heist. Now, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. It's very important for the development of the channel. And we'll be back in just a few days with another interesting episode of the life in the early 20th century. All right, take care, everybody.